Thank you, everybody. So, today we will explore the story of batik, a wax-resist dyeing technique from Java, Indonesia. We will explore a few different regional styles, some influences that shape their production, and how batik ultimately became a global phenomenon. We will also look at some of the earliest examples of wax-resist dyeing from other cultures to give context to the history, uniqueness, and place of Javanese batik in the world. To truly appreciate batik, we need to understand the amount of work that goes into its making. So here we have a typical central Javanese batik with 3 colors. So we can see here there's an off-white, dark blue, indigo, and soga brown. To create these 3 colors requires multiple steps. Now we remember that a resist dyeing technique means that rather than applying the color directly onto the cloth, the artisan applies a resist material and then dye the fabric. So where the resist sits, the dye cannot penetrate those areas. And then when the resist is removed, the original color of the cloth underneath is revealed. To introduce a second color or a different shade, then the entire process has to be repeated. So this sample book illustrates a minimum of 8 steps to create the 3 color of the central Javanese batik that we just saw previously. In Java, the primary resist material is liquid wax. This is applied using one of 2 methods. The first is hand-drawn or tulis. This is traditionally done by women using a pen-like tool called canting. This has a copper reservoir with a spout and a bamboo handle. And depending on the design's complexity, the artisan might follow a pre-drawn pattern as seen on the left, or for a simpler or more traditional design, they can work entirely from memory, as shown on the right. And the most desirable batiks are double-sided, meaning that the design is clear on both sides of the cloth. This requires the wax to be applied on both the front and the back for each of the waxing sequence. The second method is stamp batik or batik cap. This is traditionally performed by men. This is a much later technique. This has emerged around the mid-19th century and is mostly used in workshop setting to expedite the batik making process. So today we will cover a broad range of topics. First, we will look at some early examples of resist dyeing culture to see how Javanese batik fits into this global tradition. And then we will turn to batik making in Java and look at its development from the 13th century up to the Second World War. And finally, we will look at how Javanese batik became a global phenomenon, particularly during its early period of influence between 1817 and 1920s. This cotton fragment, dated to the 2nd or 3rd century CE, is likely one of the earliest surviving examples of batik. It's discovered in a tomb in China's Xinjiang region along the overland Silk Road. It has been attributed to Indian manufacture. Its iconography reflects the influence of Gandharan art, which combines Hellenistic and Central Asian elements. You can see in one corner there is a nude female with a halo, and she's holding a cornucopia. This suggests that she is the personification of earth. And on the bottom edge, we can see the tail of a dragon that's most probably of Central Asian in origin. We also find many resist-dyed fragments bearing small flowers made of dots. These have been found all along the Silk Road on both cotton and silk, and they appear to have been produced over many centuries. On the left is a 4th to 5th century examples from Greco-Roman refuse site in the ancient Egyptian town of Perenike. This cotton fabric most likely originated in Western India in Gujarat. In the middle are silk fragments with the same design from Xinjiang. This is dated to the Tang Dynasty, so 7th to 10th century. And on the right is an earlier figurine found in the same region. Here it shows a man dressed in a tie-dyed shirt and a resist-dyed patterned skirt. Around the same period as the Xinjiang fragment, we find the same motif depicted on numerous metal statuary in Java. This 9th century bronze bodhisattva is a prime example with the detail clearly showing cluster of dots forming a stylized flower design. We also find this motif on many contemporaneous Indian metal statuary. And while we cannot know for certain whether the artisan intended to represent resist-dyed cloth specifically, there was clearly a widespread preference for this design. This is an aesthetic that is a visual vocabulary that's likely rooted in textile techniques such as batik. There are many other examples of textile patterns on Javanese statuary that appear to reflect imported fabrics, particularly of Indian and Chinese origins. One example is a resist-dyed pattern of flowers with distinctive comma-shaped petals, shown here alongside its corresponding depiction on Javanese metal statues from the same period. So for those who are interested in exploring this topic, I discuss this connection in more detail in an article in this free downloadable book noted on the screen. By the 13th century and 14th centuries, we find actual physical evidence of imported Indian fabrics in Indonesian archipelago. Many of these textiles were kept as family or community heirlooms and were used in rituals. This 14th to 15th century trade cloth from Gujarat depicts 2 rows of women wearing elaborately patterned sari and jewelry. The technique employs block printing for the red color, and hand painting of the resist, like a batik, for the blue area. In the later period, a significant volume of fine Indian textiles arrived from the Coromandel coast, particularly after the 16th century, when the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, came to dominate the archipelago trade. This example features floral and leaf patterns scattered across the main field over thin stripes, creating a 3-dimensional effect, as you can see here. The end borders here feature a white stripe and triangular motif, this one, known in Indonesia as tumpal or pucuk kerbung or bamboo shoots. This layout, we can see that it has the body, there's a board design, and then this part here is called the kapala or head. This Indian trade cloth layout become later the standard format for Japanese batik cloth. A question that many scholars have raised is whether the Javanese batik tulis technique was an independent local development or an adaptation from the Indian kalamkari tradition seen here on the left, or from the batik tradition found in China, northern Vietnam, or in Thailand, seen in the middle. But the tool themselves perhaps suggests different technological lineages. In kalamkari, the tool is a sharpened bamboo reed with a shaft wrapped in cotton or wool to act as a wax reservoir. And among the Southwest Chinese minority group, the tool is a triangular flat copper blade. This is set into a wooden handle, and it's held with the blade pointing toward the artisan. So it's quite different than the way one would hold a canting. In fact, there is no direct evidence confirming the transmission of this technique from one region to another. Now, let us turn our focus to Java. On the left is a map of the Indonesian archipelago. On the right is a map of Java, and then also this little island, Madura, along southern part of Sumatra. And the primary batik producing region are marked in red dot. If we look closer, note that there's a high concentration of production centers along the north coast of Java, right here. These were ancient ports. These were places where goods from various regions were collected and exchanged. These are the area cosmopolitan centers. They are home to Arab, Indian, Chinese, and later European trading communities. And their culture, will, as you can see later, will reflect in some of the batiks that we will see. Batik produced in this area is collectively known as North Coast batik, or batik pasisir. And its design reflects this eclectic global influence. The inland region of Yogyakarta and Surakarta, right here, by contrast, these are areas that became the spiritual and political center of Javanese court culture, and the batik produced here follows a different aesthetic, commonly referred to as Central Javanese style. So you will hear this term, North Coast and Central Javanese, and just note that they refer to these regions. The earliest textual reference that may represent a precursor of batik are found in ancient legal inscription known as Sima Charter. This is land grants records that provided tax relief to communities in exchange for the maintenance of religious institutions. So from the 12th century, this document mentioned tulis warna, literally meaning hand-drawn coloring. This suggests that a that the local Javanese tradition of decorating cloth by hand was already recognized at this time. We have also evidence that highly sophisticated batik was already being produced as early as the 13th and 14th centuries. This remarkable blue and white batik fragment was discovered in Sulawesi Island, although it was almost certainly made in Java. Half of the width is missing, but the length is complete. The technique is undoubtedly batik, confirmed by traces of wax resist still visible on the white ground. Interestingly, the base cloth is likely of Indian in origin, and I discuss the reasoning for this in an article that's noted here for your further reading. Enough of this design survived to allow for a reconstruction, which reveals confronting quadruped flanking a temple or altar here. This creature, characterized by their large ears and bushy tails, appear in Javanese art from the 9th century, but are most prominent on 14th and 15th century East Javanese temples, where they are associated with the god Indra and his heavenly realm. Most notably, the design used this step outline. As you can see, it's not a smooth line, but rather it has this step design. This suggests that the artisan was consciously imitating a woven pattern, most likely a complex double ikat. This raises the possibility that batik may have developed initially as a faster means of achieving the appearance of prestigious double ikat weaving. Roughly 100 years later, we find another remarkable blue and white batik dated to the 14th or 15th centuries. The main field depicts two figures, male and female, meeting in a fantastical landscape with sprawling trees. The design is mirrored both horizontally and vertically across the entire cloth. And the top and bottom here feature rows of compartments containing a crested scaled animal. Unlike the earlier fragment, there is no step outline. Here, the artisan was no longer imitating a woven technique, but embracing the fluid painterly potential of batik. The trees in this batik are strikingly similar to a contemporary motif called pisang Bali, which belongs to the semen category from the word semi, meaning to sprout or to spring forth. This pattern evokes themes of fertility and new beginnings. The pisang Bali motif is associated with tales of star-crossed lovers who were separated but eventually reunited. Given this romantic imagery and the textile's large-scale format, the piece was likely used as a ceremonial hanging, perhaps as a backdrop or canopy during a wedding. The Asian Art Museum in San Francisco holds a rare 17th century piece that served as a vital bridge in batik history. Though it has a very dark overall tone, close examination reveals a dense, intricate landscape of pavilion, mountains, animals, and vines. Most distinctive are the disembodied wings. This is a motif that's known as lar. This abstract landscape also belongs to the semen category. The wings represent Garuda, the vehicle of Vishnu, and these are remnant of Java's Hindu-Buddhist period that persists as an important motif long after the widespread conversion to Islam in the 16th century. The cloth is hand-spun cotton, most likely of local production. Today, hand-spun cloth for batik is nearly extinct. It only survived in the Tuban region, where the artisan continued to weave traditional hand-spun ground cloth for making batik. And here on the table, I brought two pieces of contemporary batik from Tuban, and you can feel the hand-spun quality of the fabric. Now, the first individual to bring batik to the attention of the Western world was Sir Thomas Stamford Raffles, who served as Lieutenant Governor of Java during the 5-year period of British rule from 1811 to 1816 in Indonesia. In 1817, he published The History of Java, which included a detailed account of batik production. Raffles collected various objects, including batik, although only 2 of his pieces that he collected survive today. Both of these are in this distinctive soga brown of Central Java, with a motif that is called parang rusak, or broken dagger. This one and this one. After Raffles, more people became interested in collecting batik. Some collected for research purposes, others used them for models to be copied. And this collection today became a time capsule of what were produced in the past. One vital record of Central Javanese batik is from the late 19th century. This is the Groeneman collection in the Netherlands, consisting of 118 batik squares assembled by Isaac Groeneman. He was a private physician at the Yogyakarta court under the Sultan Hamengkubuwono VII, who reigned from 1877 to 1921. These cloths were shipped to the Netherlands in 4 batches between 1891 and 1892, and each of them accompanied by a letter identifying the Javanese pattern names. Several of the patterns belong to the larangan or forbidden motif. These are patterns regulated by court decree from the 18th century onward, specifying which design could be worn at the court according to rank and the relationship to the Sultan. So for example, one of the larangan motif is the parang rusak. The rule is, the larger the parang, the higher your rank must be. So the larger is obviously reserved for the Sultan himself. And this is the parang rusak barong. On the right, we see Sultan Hamengkubuwono VII wearing this royal pattern, layered over a silk double ikat textiles from India that he used as pants. This is known as patola. And his jacket is made of triangular patchwork that is called tambal, meaning to patch. There are many batik that uses tambal or patchwork pattern because this is a design that's supposed to be protective. This large batik cloth is probably the oldest surviving example with this pattern from the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. It is composed of 2 cloths joined together to create a large field. And the batik design is further traced with gold paint, it's called Prada, that creates this shimmering effect. We don't know what it was used for, but perhaps it was used as a hanging because of its size. And I brought also today an example of Central Javanese batik with various design like a sampler motif that's used in the Central Javanese court. So a very rapid development of Javanese batik occurred in the 19th and 20th centuries as production shifted from domestic work to workshop setting. And there are several factors that drove this transformation. One of them is the European cloth importation. Until the early 19th century, most people made batik on locally cultivated hand-spun cotton. Some who could afford used Indian cotton, but most people weave their own cloth. But the influx of factory-made European cotton begins in 1830, and especially by 1850, Dutch mills had flooded the market with machine-woven cotton cloth. Along with the machine-produced cotton, which has smoother surface than hand-woven cloth, 2 things happens. First, it enabled people working with the hand-drawn batik tulis to create far more intricate designs. And then it also allowed the use of copper stamp. The copper stamp itself was introduced between 1840 and 1850, and this stamp allowed much faster production than the hand-drawn tulis. This made batik more widely available commercially and allowed Javanese producers to compete with European printed imitations. And this is a largely successful attempt, as Indonesian consumers prove highly discerning. They are consistently preferring their own batik to the European substitute. And the last is synthetic dyes. By the early 20th century, many batik producers had transitioned from using organic dyes, which is very labor-intensive, to synthetic ones. This had the most visible effect on the North Coast Javanese batik, which was already known for its colorful palette, but now there are a lot more shades for them to choose from. So when you look at batik, keep in mind these 3 aspects: whether the cloth is hand-woven or is it commercial cotton, whether it's done with batik tulis or is it chopped, the stamped, and whether the color is from natural or synthetic dyes. This handsome piece from Lhasa, dated to the 19th century, depicts Chinese phoenixes. Because of the date and the deep earth tone quality of the red, this is most likely natural color. This red, which is derived from the mangkudu root, is in fact one of the signature of Lhasa batik. The design layout follows the standard batik format, which we discussed before, that came from the Indian trade cloth. It has the body, the badan, it has a side plank, it also has this tumpal border. The word kain panjang here on the screen, meaning long cloth, literally, and you could wear it just by wrapping it around your body. What is interesting to note here is that the tumpal on the left and the right is different color, right? And the reason is so that the wearer can choose which side they would like to show that would be on the outside. So in a way, you have two cloths for one. And this, as you can see also, the design has no right side up direction, so you could wear it either way. In this later production, we moved toward a more naturalistic pictorial style. This piece is for sarong, which means that it is sewn into a tube. So in a sarong, the tumpal surface each other to make this design. And this section is called the kapala, or the head. The design here features lotus plants and birds. This is a quintessential Chinese motif, which reflects the deep heritage of Lasem, which remains a predominantly Chinese community even today. On the left is an architectural detail from a traditional Lasem house that displays nearly identical lotus here, and also there's a bird as well. Cirebon batik is unique among the North Coast styles. Although it had an Islamic court, its art is deeply rooted in Chinese aesthetic. This is the famous Megamendung cloud motif, which derives directly from Chinese art, but Javanese artisans transform it by introducing sophisticated color gradation, often 7 to 9 shades, to create depth and volume. So I think there's one batik there that you can count how many shades of the blue that makes the cloud. This Chinese legacy traces back to 15th century marriage recorded in the Cirebon chronicles called Babat Cirebon. And the story goes that Sunan Gunung Jati, which is one of the 9 saints who spread Islam in Java, married a Chinese prince called Princess Ong Tien. Whether this is true or not, we don't know. Another example of Chinese influence in Cirebon is this altar cloth. This would have been hung in the front of a temple or family altar table at home. Here we can see the central lion carries a censer topped with a flaming pearl and surrounded by auspicious chilin. And the bottom corner features a cloud color design along the top we see this spotted deer. Today I brought a similar piece also from Cirebon that shows also the chilin. And in here, actually, you have also phoenixes. Islamic culture and Arabic script also had influence on batik, giving rise to a genre known as batik besurek, besurek meaning writing. This early 20th century style from Cirebon and Jambi featured 3 central lozenges and dense grid of repeating prayers to Allah and the Prophet Muhammad. The design also incorporates stylized tugra, the seals of the Ottoman Sultan. These sacred words and symbols imbued batik besurek with protective apotropaic power. So this kind of cloth was never worn as lower garment because they can never be set upon. It can only be worn on the head or the shoulder, or as a covering, for example, for like funeral bier. So today I brought a Cirebon piece as well. This is a classic blue and white batik known as Kelengan from Indramayu. This style originated from the desire to copy blue and white ceramics that were highly prized status symbol in the region. The design with peacocks and birds on flowering branches carries a message of harmony and growth, making this batik to be well suited for a wedding for a European community. At a certain point, the head or the kapala here no longer featured the traditional tumpal motif that we saw before, but now it features this European-style buketan, or flower bouquet. This is a motif that is popularized by Indo-European and later Indo-Chinese workshop on the North Coast. The body depicts the military powers of the 20th century asserting controls over air, sea, and land, as symbolized by the airplanes, steamboats with cannon, and marching soldiers with rifles. But most striking is the depiction of the soldiers because they're carrying American flag. This type of batik is often called kain company, a batik genre documenting contemporary events, technology, and military presence. The inspiration of this design is likely a response to the rising US influence in the Pacific on the eve of the Second World War. This piece also illustrates how the use of stamp, because all of these were actually stamped, that the use of stamp does not necessarily produce static results. By varying the placement of the stamp, the direction, and the coloring, the scene appears very lively and dynamic. So I brought a piece that is different color, but also part of this kain company style. And I think there's also a soldier here that's carrying American flags. One of the most celebrated Indo-European batik artists is Eliza Venezuelan. This batik features very soft pastel color of blue and pink with delicate flowers. At that time, if you have one of this Venezuelan's cloth, it means that you're very wealthy. Because if you can imagine, the average wage of a government employee at that time was 20 guilders a month. And one of these sarong cost around 13 guilders. So her batiks were like luxury goods of the day. So in order to protect the authenticity of her work, she signed her batiks. And she's not the first to do this. Many Indo-European workshops also signed their batiks. And then this practice was then took over, also adopted by Chinese workshop and other workshops. So I brought this example of a signed batik from the Chinese workshop. See if you could find the signature. The signature reads Oi Mo Chua. The Oi family is well known for their business in batik in this area in Pekalongan, and this is in North Coast Java. But one of the most famous of the Oi family is perhaps Oi Suchun. He started a workshop that specializes in high-end batik. His batik is always hand-drawn, so he never uses stamp. And this workshop still continues today in the hands of the third generation. This workshop once employed 150 workers, but now operates with only 12 batikers. And Oi Suchun batik today has moved beyond luxury goods into the realm of collectibles. A few years ago, there was already a 5-year delivery time if you order one of this batik. 2 years just to be on the waiting list, and then the 3 years for completion. So if you have one of these, you would never wear it. You just put it away. So protecting the brand is very important, right? Because there are many forgeries, and sometimes even signature can be copied. So Oi Suchun add another authentication measures with the ink stamps. And because the stamp change over time, the stamp too can help date a piece. So for example, this batik from the Asian Art Museum bears a stamp with the family name still in Chinese, indicating this is an earlier period because at a certain time, after 1960, all Chinese people in Indonesia have to adopt Indonesian name, and we have to abandon the Chinese, our Chinese name. We cannot speak Chinese at home. So the fact that this still have the Chinese writing, this means this is an earlier product. And then also the inscription Batik Kunstwerk also later changed because this is a Dutch, then it changed to Indonesian word, Batik art. The spelling Jalan with a D in at the front, that's also an old spelling. So there are various ways to also date batik. So the last part of this talk is on the global impact of Javanese batik. Here I can only cover a few aspects, but primarily I think the impact of batik on the global stage can be seen in two distinct spheres. One in the commercial industry for general consumption, and then the other is on the artistic production for mid to high-end design and arts and craft. The commercial potential of batik for Europe was first recognized by Raffles. He noted that Javanese batik could offer Britain two market opportunities. One is that high-quality cotton cloth from British mill could be exported to Java for local batik production. Two, that British factories could produce mass-market imitation of batik to compete directly with authentic Javanese products. In Britain, Manchester was a hub for producing these imitations. So on the left, we see an authentic Javanese batik collected by Charles Beving for his company. It features this whimsical design with angels, animals, alongside these sprawling buildings. And there's an inscription somewhere here that says Wereldtentoonstelling, or World Exhibition. It suggests that this piece may have been acquired at the World's Fair in London, maybe in 1886 or 1889. And then on the right is a sample of the imitation fabric produced based on it, but for the African market. The Dutch also tried to implement both of Raffles' idea when they took over the Indonesia archipelago again. The first attempt was highly successful. By 1850, Java was inundated with large quantity of Dutch mill fabrics. And as we said before, as a result, many batik no longer being produced on locally hand-woven cloth. I think many people it's just not very economically wise to do it that way. The second endeavor proved far less successful. Despite their effort to copy Javanese design very closely, as this examples here shows, the Javanese consumers continue to prefer authentic batik. So one of their most successful enduring companies in the imitation batik trade is Flisco. It's founded in 1846, and they're still in operation today. And I actually brought one of the fabric from the Flisco company. And also the skirt that I'm wearing is also from the Flisco company. Its success in finding the market for batik imitation is not in Java, but ultimately in West Africa. This market is far more receptive for Dutch wax print. What initially were based on Javanese design later became adopted to incorporate West African patterns. Many of their patterns remain in active use among Ghanaian communities today. One example shown here is a pattern popular in Ghana called subura, meaning water well. And today, wax spring is no longer produced exclusively in the Netherlands, however. There are many local factories in Ghana, as well as manufactured in India and China. They all produce copies and printed version of this fabric. A fitting endpoint to the Dutch wax story is the work of British-Nigerian artist Yinka Shinobare. He's known for fashioning Dutch wax prints into elaborate European period costumes. He uses this material as a basis for his commentary on empire and identity. On the screen here is a video installation featuring figures in elaborate 18th century European costumes made from vibrant Dutch wax print fabrics. So here is a fabric that began as a European imitation of Javanese batik, which later found a market in West Africa and later embraced as distinctly African, yet carries with it the full complexity of the colonial history. Turning now to the artistic sphere, one of the key channels through which Javanese batik reached the Western public was the World's Fair. A particularly important moment was the International Colonial and Trade Exhibition held in Amsterdam in 1883, which gave European audience direct exposure to Javanese batik. Some batiks were commissioned and sent for the occasion, such as this one, and many then entered the museum collection. These examples from Tegal features both European and traditional Javanese motif. You could see there's European ships and an elephant and birds, including the Garuda wing. It was in the Netherlands that batik was first taken up by artists as a medium used in decorative arts. The Haarlem Colonial Museum played a central role in this. It collected not only batik specimen, but also documentation on the production process, cardboard examples, wax samples, canting, and chops. The museum also conducted experiments with the technique developing wax and dye formulation to suit the Dutch environment and their available resources. Around 1890, several Dutch artists inspired by the arts and craft movement in England, which rejected industrial mass production in favor of hand craftsmanship, turned to batik as a medium. C.A. Lyon Cachet was the first among them known to have engaged with batik seriously. He applied the batik technique to parchment, as we can see here, on the book cover of the sports album presented to Queen Wilhelmina as a coronation gift in 1898. Chris Lebeau is a student of Lyon Cachet. He came to be regarded as one of the finest exponents of Dutch Art Nouveau. These two pieces from the early 20th century demonstrate how fully he absorbed not only the batik technique, but its color and design sensibility. Another influential figure is Johan Thornpicker, who served as artistic director of an art and crafts gallery in The Hague from 1898 to 1900s. This is home to the first commercial batik operation in Europe. He deliberately cracked the cooled wax selectively, creating the characteristic of fine veining that's visible in his finished pieces, as you can see on this image. So these three figures that we've mentioned represent only a fraction of the Dutch artists who took up batik as a medium for decorative art. The enthusiasm for batik became widespread, and it was not confined to the Netherlands. Batik as an artistic practice spread to other European countries and fed into broader movement across the continent to Germany, Romania, Paris, and so on. In the US, there were many factors that promoted the introduction of batik. In 1893, for example, Chicago hosted the Columbian Exposition. Javanese batik was displayed not only as finished product, but also the process of making it was demonstrated live. This photograph shows Javanese women at work producing batik, bringing the production of the craft itself live before the Western audience. And the pieces that were exhibited here later became collected by the Field Museum of Chicago. Many batiks, I think, from this time became, a lot of them were made for the Western consumption. So, such as this one, which I brought this piece over there. Another influential exhibition is the Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco in 1915. Many of the batik that were exhibited here later were acquired by the Smithsonian Institution. By the 1920s, batik appeared to have taken hold in the United States as part of the broader arts and crafts movement. There are many instruction manuals such as these, along with magazine articles and exhibition that fuels the enthusiasm for batik in the avant-garde circles in Greenwich Village, for example, and art schools, department stores, and craft education program nationwide. One of the most accomplished artists is probably Peter Meyer. However, I wasn't able to actually find his piece in any museum. So this is a research that's ongoing for me that I find very interesting. In the book here, I find it also interesting that Gertrude Clayton Lewis said that the book was written in 1922, and she mentioned that batik at this time has firmly established itself as a beautiful and practical art craft for American worker. So basically, by this time, it's a medium that was embraced by many artists in the United States. Batik also left its imprint in Bengal through Rabindranath Tagore. He traveled to Java in 1927, where he became fascinated by Javanese batik. He brought the knowledge of batik making along with examples of Javanese batik back to Santiniketan in Bengal, where he lived. And there, the Bengali artists adapted the technique using a brush to apply the wax instead of chanting. Batik also subsequently taught at the university there, using local design sensibility as the inspiration. So now we have Santiniketan batik, such as this one on the screen. So I want to end with our batik journey here, where it began in Indonesia. This is where batik remains a living tradition. Here too, the medium has been taken up by contemporary artists as a vehicle for personal expression. This work by Mira Sungkar commemorates the 2004 tsunami that devastated Aceh in Sumatra, claiming the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. In the detail, we see floodwaters engulfing buildings to their rooftops, figures clinging to floating tree trunks, life suspended in a moment of catastrophe. So we have seen here today how a textile tradition from Java was shaped by the foreign influences it encountered, how it traveled far beyond its origins, transforming in meaning at every stage of the journey. As a trade commodity, it became the basis for industrial imitation. In West Africa, the Dutch wax print derived from Javanese batik was adopted so thoroughly that it became a symbol of local identity in Africa. In the hands of Yinka Shonibare, the same fabric became a vehicle for interrogating the very colonial history that carried it there. And in Europe, technique was absorbed into decorative arts, feeding into Art Nouveau and beyond, inspiring artists across countries and movements well into the 20th century. And in Indonesia, it remains a living tradition, one that continues to evolve and grow today. Thank you.